Hello, my name is Lauren Layfield, and this is Your Next Podcast, the podcast which creates a brilliant list of shows for you to try, adding a new one each and every week. This week, it's a good old-fashioned David versus Goliath tale, which takes place in Scotland and stars the one and, thankfully only, Donald Trump. Trumped is a 6-part series charting the fight that one Scottish community had to stop the world's greatest golf course being built right on their doorstep by, you've guessed it, Donald Trump. The first episode goes right back to 2005 when this decade-long saga began, so buckle up.
BBC Sounds.
Now, you call me a stupid fool, a zero-talented loser, a moron. Do you still think that's the case?
No, I think you're unfair. I think you're very one-sided. I think that you have an agenda, and, the agenda is probably better if you go against Trump than if you were in favor of Trump. I think as a journalist, I think you're very biased. Stupid, I don't know. I've never taken your IQ test. Would you like to do one for me?
I'm sitting opposite Donald Trump in the boardroom of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue in New York. It's a glass skyscraper with 58 floors and a soaring marble atrium. How many floors up from here is your office, Mr. Trump?
I'm about 10, and then I live about 68 floors up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
68 up.
Which is quite a view, but...
Wow.
Quite a view. How's Scotland going? How's everything?
I'm already puzzled by Trump telling me he lives on the 68th floor of a 58-story building. On one side of the room are shelves of Trump pictures and ornaments. On the other side are floor-to-ceiling windows opening up astounding views of Central Park and Manhattan. It feels a bit surreal to be here because I don't usually spend time in places like this. There are a handful of people in the room with us. Trump's son, Don Jr.'s here, his lawyer, our camera crew, and another cameraman.
Fellas, I've never quite seen a clip like this.
I didn't ask for this interview, Trump did. I'm filming, and so is he.
Well, you've said some things that weren't exactly correct, and, that's why I'm doing the interview also. I want to set the record straight, and to set the record straight is very important.
Donald Trump has spent decades in this building making deals and building a personal brand that is now instantly recognizable across the world. But we're talking together before he became president of the most powerful country in the world. And this story starts even further back, at a time when Trump was best known for his reality TV series, The Apprentice.
I've mastered the art of the deal, and have turned the name Trump into the highest quality brand.
At its peak, the show attracted 28 million viewers. To Americans, he's the personification of the wealthy tycoon, the celebrity businessman, a sharply dressed super boss who can smell BS a mile off.
Where are you covering up to here?
But to the people where I'm from, he means something else entirely.
Should I button or not button? I think button.
I'm here on his doorstep because years earlier, Trump arrived on mine. From 2006, he began to turn my corner of Scotland upside down, damaging a protected natural landscape and dividing the communities around it.
Is this your primary camera for me? This one.
Several years have passed since I made a trilogy of documentary films on the subject, and I'm still trying to make sense of how what happened. That's because it's a story that's still unfolding with extraordinary consequences that pits my people against big money. It's a tale of secret deals, vested interests, and political ambition. And it's the story of the people who find themselves in an unimaginable situation, but who stand up for what they believe in against remarkable odds. I'm Anthony Baxter, and from BBC Scotland News and The Big Light, this is Trumped, Episode 1, Teeing Off.
I've been looking to do something in Europe, and I'm looking at Scotland. It's a place I could do business.
This has been the drying green
for the salmon fishing here now for 3 generations of my family.
We then heard the rumour that Donald Trump was involved, and to be quite honest, I started to laugh.
My earliest memory when we came to see the house, fantastic place. Untouched, natural beauty, unique, just loved it.
Susan Monroe's cottage sits behind gently rolling hills and farmland in the northeast coast of Scotland in Aberdeenshire. She and her young family moved here in the early 1980s.
Just milk?
Just milk, please.
It's an ideal place to bring kids up, no traffic, the beach on your doorstep, and I think they had a really lovely time out here. In the holidays, this place was always full of happy children. You know, it was a great place. So many people used to come, you know, when the kids were little. It was just the freedom and everything.
To the east of her cottage lies one of Aberdeenshire's treasures, a long sandy beach where the tide goes out hundreds of yards and comes in to meet the mounds of continually changing dunes. Towering white sandhills covered with wispy green grass.
The dunes are our protection here. It's such a delicate system, it protects us from the sea.
And the dunes themselves are also protected. By law, they cannot be built on or developed because of their natural beauty and unique ecosystem of animals, birds and plant life. Though she owns her own home, Susan's property is surrounded by the many estate. Now, the estate's 800 acres includes several miles of those sand dunes. The estate has been owned by landed gentry since the 17th century and changed hands and families numerous times. And in 2005, it's owned by an American lawyer in the oil industry. Susan is in her early 50s by then, and her boys are grown but still live with her.
Coming up our road? Yeah. No. I can't see now.
You have to make a point of visiting the Monroes' cottage. It's not a place where you might be just passing by and drop in. So it's strange when a middle-aged man with a posh accent knocks on the Monroes' door asking if Susan wants to sell her house.
That was the guy that came to my door and called himself Mr. White. And he was walking along the beach and he saw my house, was his first sentence. I knew he was telling lies because you can't see my house from the beach, so my alarms went up after his first few words.
He says his name is Peter White, and he introduces the woman who's with him as his wife. He says they're on holiday, and as they were walking along the beach, he spotted the Monroes' home and just had to ask. Susan says no, she's not interested in selling. 10 minutes walk along a coastal path from Susan's house and looking out to sea is an old Coast Guard station. It's now the home of David Milne. The same man and woman visit him.
There was a knock at the door, and here was Peter White with a woman in tow whom he introduced as his wife.
Mr. White says to David that he spent a week hunting in the area and has fallen in love with it. They're keen to buy a holiday home. Would he consider selling? Like Susan Monroe, David bought a dilapidated property with spectacular views looking over the dunes and out to sea. It's been a labour of love, and he and his wife spend years doing it up.
And I actually moved in September of 1992 and have been here ever since. Converted it, extended it, altered it, changed it, painted it, etc.
Like Susan, David and his wife fell in love with the landscape and the quiet it offered them.
I like the natural world. I like the fact that you can walk outside and not have someone leaning over the fence asking what you had for breakfast this morning. You've got the freedom to watch what is out there. You can see the badgers, the foxes, the deer, the kestrels, the buzzards, etc. It's all there. You want a quiet day? You can have a quiet day.
David politely said it was nice to meet him, but he wasn't interested in selling.
And it was a very short conversation. It was the same, sorry, not for sale, not interested, thank you, goodbye. And that was all there was to it.
There's another place Mr. White would make an appearance. It's about a 25-minute walk along the fields from David's, 15 minutes from Susan's. This place is bigger. It covers 23 acres and is owned by Michael Forbes. It's a small working farm, and it has a main farmhouse and a series of largish barns. There's also another small house on the land where Michael's elderly mother Molly lives. It's made up of 2 static caravans joined together. Michael moved his mother there after his father died so that she wouldn't be on her own. The sign outside the door says Paradise.
My Paradise sign. I still do rub it down with a very fine sandpaper, really very fine, and then varnish it.
Michael and his wife live in the farmhouse. It sits close to the sand dunes and the sea, and along a track is an old boathouse or salmon fishing bothy.
Well, this is where we cleaned our nets. You know, if they've been in the sea for more than a week or 2 weeks, they were pretty grubby and full of seaweed and things. So we took them up here and dried them off and then just cleaned them. Then mend them and, you know, whatever they needed doing, and then get them all ready to go back in the sea again. And this has been the drying green for the salmon fishing here now for 3 generations of my family.
Michael moved here permanently in 1966, and he continued to fish until the salmon all but disappeared.
Oh, you were up all hours, you were working night and day, you know, working at salmon fishing, mending nets or fishing in nets or whatever. And I just loved it. It was just, you were like free, you know.
By the early 2000s, he's working as a foreman in a nearby quarry as well as working on the farm. And when the same smartly dressed man arrives at his door asking if they might be interested in selling, Michael's wife Sheila was blunter than David and Susan. She tells him in no uncertain terms to take a hike. The Forbes, the Monroes and the Milnes are friendly enough to each other, but all prize their privacy. It's why they love living here in the first place. So they don't mention the mysterious Peter White to one another.
I searched every inch of the coastline of Scotland, which is larger than England's, by the way, and I eventually came across this piece of land in Aberdeenshire, and it seemed to tick all the boxes.
This is the man who was knocking on doors and making calls. Is there anybody who was interested in selling their home to you?
Absolutely not. I mean, the people that lived around the Many estate, they were there because of the privacy, the views, the beauty, the seclusion. Well, they didn't want to move. They loved where they lived, and I don't blame them.
And it turns out his name isn't Peter White. Well, not exactly.
Ultimately, it ended up in the story they got in the papers. There was Peter White knocking on doors with my wife, and we were looking for a holiday home.
His name is Neil Hobday, or to give him his full name, Neil Peter White Hobday. Neil Hobday is knocking on doors because he's a man pursuing a vision.
My dream was to find this piece of land in Scotland that could be developed and a golf course could be produced that was capable of hosting an Open Championship.
A sculpted coastline, teasing, challenging.
The Open Championship is the oldest golf tournament in the world, starting in Scotland in 1860. It's one of the 4 major men's golfing tournaments and is one of the most prestigious. And in the world of golf, to host an Open is the ultimate accolade.
This is a stern test of will. And there are those who...
Neil Hobday is immersed in this world. He's managed 2 of Scotland's top golfers, Colin Montgomery and Sam Torrance. And at this point, he's running his own business, Hobday Golf Consulting. The first time he visits the Many estate, he gets goosebumps.
This is the most beautiful property I've ever seen, with the dunes and the valleys and, you know, classic links golf, keeping the ball under the wind, bump and run. And there's lots of golf courses in Scotland that have bits of this land, but not like this. This has all of the land. This can be 18 holes that can never be compared anywhere in the world. And I had that, my heart pumping, everything was flowing, and I walked the land until it got dark and saw the bats and the owls flying over me, and I left. So yes, it was a truly extraordinary moment when I walked that land.
And it really is an extraordinary moment, because without it, this story might never have happened. This is the first time he's spoken about what happened, and it's my first opportunity to get a different side of the story.
I was introduced to Tom Griffin, who was an American oil lawyer who owned the Many estate. And he invited me to a function of his. We got talking, and I looked at his property, and it just absolutely was extraordinary. In terms of laying out a golf course there, my grandmother could lay out a golf course there. It was so natural.
Tom Griffin agrees to sell the Many estate, all 800 acres of it.
And a few days later, which was a Sunday, the Sunday Times newspaper had an article saying Donald Trump was looking to do something in Europe, maybe Ireland, maybe Scotland, maybe golf, maybe not. It was a great article, but it was a fishing expedition.
5 years earlier, Trump had developed his first golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Behind this suit and away from this boardroom lies a man with a serious obsession.
I love creating great golf courses. I love shaping Earth. It's a canvas.
Now, the mogul who made his mark in the Big Apple.
Back in 2005, few Scots had read Donald Trump's self-help business books or visited his casino in Atlantic City. Not many had played on his luxury US golf courses or even watched the US version of The Apprentice. So it's a tribute to his powers of self-promotion that the people of Scotland knew anything about him, or about his obsession with golf.
I thought, well, he's into golf and he's into property, into development, and he's half Scottish, and maybe I should give him a call.
It's probably not the first thing you or I would think of doing, but we're not Neil Hobday. Born in Lusaka, Zambia, and brought up in Ethiopia and Scotland, he attended Fettes College, a top fee-paying school in Edinburgh. He was an officer in the Scots Guard, a prestigious regiment in the British Army. He'll eventually become head of guards at the Polo Club, working for the British royal family. Neil's a networker, and he's well connected. Some years before he first visited the Many estate, Neil tried to develop a luxury golf course in Scotland. It nearly bankrupted him, but this time he's going to be doing it differently. The Scottish Government has recently come up with a new slogan for Scotland.
Scotland is being promoted as the best small country in the world. The First Minister Jack McConnell unveiled the new advertising campaign at Edinburgh Airport. It's part of a drive to attract more visitors and to sell more Scottish products abroad.
Think of a country. And there's a government organisation to help attract these investors. It's called Scottish Development International, or SDI. Scotland is open for business, especially for investment from wealthy countries and individuals.
My name's Donald Trump, and I'm the largest real estate developer in New York. I own buildings all over the place, model agencies, the Miss Universe pageant, jetliners, golf courses, casinos, and private resorts like Mar-a-Lago.
Neil Hobday gets SDI on board, and through his golf contacts, Neil gets the number for Donald Trump's organisation and says,
I think we have some land here in Scotland that could be interesting for Donald Trump to build a golf course on, and hotel and residential and whatever, second golf course, all the other things that could go with it.
Neil is pitching more than golf. He's also pitching houses. Homes are an important part of how you make your money back from an expensive development, but it means you need planning permission, and in Scotland's rural areas, that's not always straightforward. Nevertheless, Trump is interested, and Neil is invited to pitch to Trump in person at Trump Tower. Scottish Development International agrees to support Hobday's trip to New York and sends 2 representatives to help out. But this is Hobday's show, His big opportunity, and for Trump it's an opportunity to hold the biggest and most prestigious golf championship. Hobday knew this was the pitch of his life, and he got advice on how to handle it.
And I had been told by someone in the Trump organization that Donald Trump will interrupt you continually through your pitch to try and knock you off course. I thought, oh, well. So in this little hotel I was in Manhattan, I practiced my pitch in the mirror like 20 times. So when I was in front of him, he did start trying to do this interjecting and asking questions to knock me off course. And of course, because I had rehearsed it 20 times the night before in the mirror in my bathroom, he couldn't. And I just kept going. I answered the question, and I keep going. I answered the question, keep going. And he obviously realised that I knew that what he was, because he had this smile on his face, because he realised that I knew.
And according to Neil, it worked.
And the meeting went very well. I did my pitch, and Trump, who had never seen the land, but had seen photographs and maps and knew where it was and so forth, and made a very instinctive decision there and then. He said, Neil, go back to Scotland and get this deal done. I want to buy the land. I want to build a golf course there.
Trump believes that as soon as people know he's building there, they'll expect a lot more than market value for their homes. So this is why Neil Hobday is knocking on doors of the many residents, pretending to be looking for a holiday home.
Yeah, I used my two middle names, Peter White. And I hated doing it. I felt very uncomfortable doing it.
Neil Hobday says this sort of approach is standard commercial practice and is done to make sure the buyer's identity remains confidential.
Trump said that when he buys property, he tries to buy the property, the main property, and then everything around it, what he calls buffer zone, because he doesn't want anyone getting rich on his presence there. And it gives them protection from other development and so forth. So that's why he did it. I did not enjoy or appreciate doing that, and I regret it to this day.
But even though Neil Hobday thinks he's being discreet, the gossip locally is there's a connection between the many estate and the flamboyant American tycoon Donald Trump. Word reaches David Milne in the old Coast Guard house.
We then heard the rumour that Donald Trump was involved, and to be quite honest, I started to laugh because I didn't think that would be possible or practicable.
But even if the rumours are unconfirmed, there's a growing sense that Scotland wants to do business with Donald Trump. 1 month after Neil's pitch, Scotland's First Minister, Jack McConnell, flies to New York and has lunch with him. McConnell is the leader of Scotland's left-of-centre Labour Party, and this is their first meeting. It's the 25th of October 2005. Outside Trump Tower, with the TV cameras filming Trump for the next series of The Apprentice, the First Minister and the billionaire bump into a Scottish reporter for STV.
Donald Trump, Stephen Jarn from Scottish Television. Tell us, why did you decide to agree to this meeting today? You're a busy man, time's money.
Well, you know, my mother was Scottish, and my mother was born in Stornoway, the Hebrides, okay? And that's serious Scotch, Jack, right? I mean, that's not playing games.
Very Scottish.
Donald Trump is an imposing presence. He stands a little taller than Scotland's leader, who's pretty much anonymous in the streets of Manhattan.
So I've been looking to do something in Europe, and I'm looking at Scotland as one of the places.
So Scotland's a place you could do business?
It's a place I could do business, and I'm greatly honoured that Jack is here because he's here trying to get business for Scotland, and I have great respect for that.
Trump walks off for another interview, but the reporter, Stephen Jarden, turns to Jack McConnell.
First Minister, what do you hope to achieve from this?
Well, we've got somebody here who's one of the most successful businessmen in the world. He's got a relationship with Scotland. He could become a global Scot, a champion for Scotland, when we want him to invest in Scotland.
And you're hired, he said?
Well, you never know. There could be life after First Minister yet.
3,300 miles away, back in Aberdeen, the local press are desperate to find out if the rumours are true. The appetite for local affairs is huge, but the stories are rarely sparkling with stardust.
There was rumours that an actor had come on his holidays to Aberdeenshire, and I was basically sent out on a wild goose chase trying to track down this actor and find out where he'd gone on his holidays. So it was definitely it was very unusual to have someone as well known as Donald Trump paying any attention whatsoever to our patch in our little corner of Scotland.
Emma Christie was 23 when she joined the Aberdeen Press and Journal newspaper as a reporter.
So I felt really proud to be working for this broadsheet, sort of serious newspaper that also was focused on local issues as well as national stories.
In the early 2000s, about half of UK households are online. Newspapers have websites, but printed journalism is still a major part of national and local affairs.
Especially in Aberdeenshire, every little shop, every garage, everywhere had the P&J billboard outside it.
In 2006, the Press and Journal had a print circulation of 83,000 readers, plus thousands more digital subscribers.
We didn't have smartphones. The newspaper was really the most reliable source of news in the region.
But this time, the P&J don't get the scoop. The BBC reports that Donald Trump is in talks over the creation of a major leisure development in Scotland.
Business leaders say it could have the biggest impact on the northeast economy since the discovery of oil. They're talking about Donald Trump's plans for a luxury golf resort on the outskirts of Aberdeen.
The North Sea oil industry has made the city prosperous since the 1960s, but by this point there is deep concern about what will happen when the oil runs out. The local newspapers, like many in the area, see the talks as a big opportunity and get behind the Trump bid. On the 27th of January 2006, the Trump Organization buys the first and largest part of the Many estate for $5.5 million, or £4.5 million. A few months later, Mickey Foote, another resident who lives on the edge of the Many estate, says he's not especially worried.
I thought what everybody else thought of Mr. Trump. Well, there's a turn-up. He's going to build a lovely golf course, and won't it be lovely? Super, I thought, lovely. And I thought a nice golf course, 1,000 acres, you could hide hide 2 golf courses.
Trump's 800 acres includes an historic manor house, swathes of farmland, and those 2.5 miles of ancient sand dunes. Trump can do what he likes with the house and the farmland, but the dunes are really what matters to the locals. They face the North Sea. It's notoriously windy and exposed here. The sand is blown across the beach, and when it falls, it's loosely held together by plants and a long, spiky grass called marram. The wind and tides have been moving and shape-shifting across the beach here for thousands of years. And the dunes are so unique, they've been given protected status called a SSSI, or, in clumsy terminology, a Site of Special Scientific Interest. No one is allowed to build on the dunes. They are protected by law, as resident Michael Forbes knows.
I was going to build a house in here when I first bought this land. Right, that was before I bought the croft. And I was told there's no way on earth I would ever be allowed to build a house in there, because it was a great national scientific interest, special flowers and butterflies and all sorts of things they were telling me.
But although the residents believe the dunes are untouchable, Neil Hobday does not.
This is not a unique site. It's an important site, but it's not unique. It's not the only one in Scotland. It's only interesting to a sort of small group of scientists,
Because Hobday is a man with a golf course-shaped dream.
I remember walking out to a specific spot, and I said, this is the first tee, and the front 9 go that way, and the back 9 goes that way, and this is pure links golf.
That specific spot wasn't the land near the dunes, or the land next to the dunes. It was the dunes themselves. So what if the Trump Organization can find a way to build on the dunes anyway? What happens then? As for the homes which border the Many estate, the ones which Neil Peter White Hobday has been trying to buy, Susan Monroe's cottage, David Milne's old Coast Guard house, and Michael Forbes' farmstead, well, if the dunes are destroyed, then their homes are spoiling the view.
Sarah, I want to get rid of that house.
It's going to create a bit of a stir, but if we're
Who cares? Who cares? You know what? Who cares?
Susan, David and Michael's new neighbour is planning something big. And it's going to hit this region like a storm.
We're looking to take a great piece of land, and on that piece of land build the greatest golf course in the world.
If you think some green fees and the tax on a hotel is on a par with North Sea oil, then I don't know what planet you're living on.
These things were getting emotive. He knew he'd screwed up. He knew.
What's the split in public opinion as regards Trump?
My guess is that in Aberdeenshire it's probably not far off 50-50.
I am from this area. I know everybody in my area, and everybody except the little majority is for this.
Well, look,
for their grandchildren, for their grandchildren.
Since when did having a legitimate concern for the environment become a crime?
That's next time on Trumped. Episode 2, David and Goliath. Trumped is a co-production by The Big Light and BBC Scotland News for BBC Sounds. It's hosted by me, Anthony Baxter. The series producer is Jennifer Tracy. It was written by Jennifer Tracy, Richard Finney and Lawrence Cook. The producers are Richard Finney and Lawrence Cook. Sound design and mixing by Brian McAlpine. Our story editor is Kirsty Williams. Original music is by Dominic Glynn. Additional journalism by Andrew Picken, fact-checking by Colin White, and additional archive research by Morven McKinnon. The executive producers are Fiona White and Shelley Joffrey. The commissioner is Gareth Hydes. We'd love it if you shared this podcast with your friends on social media. Our hashtag is Trumped. And where you can, please leave ratings and reviews in your podcast app.
Trumped is a Big Light production for BBC Scotland News, and you can carry on with the story at BBC Sounds or by searching on whatever podcast app you usually use, Apple, Spotify or Amazon. Once you've tapped follow for that, don't forget to tap follow for this show too, so you can find your next podcast. All my recommendations from the whole series will also be on Podcast Rex at www.podcastrex.com. That is www.podcastrex.com.